Hi, I'm Debbie Georgatos. Welcome to my show, America Can We Talk? Today, we're going to talk about border abandonment backfires, former Navy SEAL Craig Sawyer and founder of Veterans for Child Rescue joins me in studio, and BLM and Antifa still rioting. And of course, I'll tell you why these stories matter to you. Stay tuned.
Debbie Georgatos, host of America Can We Talk, is an author, attorney, and political analyst whose mission is to inspire the American political conversation about preserving liberty in the best country on earth. America Can We Talk is sponsored by GC Works, a Dallas-based company performing advanced technology research in the oil and gas industry.
And hello again and welcome to America Can We Talk and to today's First Five. I'm Debbie Georgatos. One of the main things that I think is beginning to surprise Americans and wake them up very quickly with this new Biden administration is how earnestly the left meant they simply will abandon the border. I think a lot of people, whatever reasons they had, didn't want to vote for President Trump, thought, how much could America really change? So we have a new president, and Biden, he's been in office before, he's been in Washington. Everything will be fine. Things won't change that much. But he actually did really mean a radical change in border policy, in border security policy. And so, for example, as you all likely know, we talked about it, he's decided they've discontinued payment for completing the wall, even for completing the sections already started, and the wall being built along the southern border in places otherwise very difficult to patrol. So that's been abandoned, that's been halted. The Remain in Mexico policy, one of the best policies that President Trump came up with on the border, was the idea that people crossing into America who walked up from various places in Central America through Mexico to come to America and seek asylum, that instead of letting them come into America, whatever processing they did, and then give them their date for hearing and let them loose into the mainland and never to be seen again, President Trump said, you know what, we'll go with this Remain in Mexico. While your asylum application is being processed, you have to remain in Mexico. That policy has been announced by President Biden as one to be reconsidered, right now suspended. So that's not happening. And then you have the story at the border of people crossing into our country. One thing I want to just tell you, I think is the most amazing thing. Simultaneous with COVID restrictions and notices to Americans how they're going to have vaccines practically forced on Americans, they discovered that in this catch and release, that was another big policy change that President Biden put in place. Under President Obama, when people would sneak into the country, be located by our Border Patrol or other agencies, they would be captured, they would be maybe get their names or their supposed names, and then released with the idea you're supposed to come back for your hearing. And so it was called catch and release. And obviously we all talked about all through the Obama years, whatever the numbers was, like 4% ever showed up for their hearing. I mean, no one came back. Obviously, once they're in, they're in. So President Trump had said, you know what, this is kind of silly. We don't catch and then release because then they never come back. And so, which is common sense, most kindergartners could tell you, but President Biden has reinstated catch and release. So now we have people crossing the border and being told, hey, you ought to look, you're going to have a hearing, so come on back. And what they've now discovered at the border is they are actually giving COVID tests to some of these people who enter America illegally. So at a recent situation in Texas, they did COVID tests, coronavirus tests on illegal immigrants. And among this, there are hundreds that they tested. 108 illegal immigrants tested positive for COVID. And the answer of the Border Patrol was to say, okay, got it, and let them loose. Said they have no policy authorizing them to do anything, to restrain them, to keep them, to put them into quarantine. They just tested them, discovered they're positive, and let them loose. Kind of contrary to an administration that ran on the idea they were going to be the tough guys. They were going to solve COVID. They were going to make things okay for America again because, by golly, Democrats know how to handle these things. And so you have, of course, nothing different happened under the Biden administration that Trump wasn't already doing that's of a good and efficacious impact on America. But you have now immigrants coming in, no policy in place to stop them, even if you find out they test positive for COVID. So President Biden has now received, logically, he's received letters from Republicans. There was a letter sent to him by 50 U.S. congressmen who are Republican saying, hey, you know what? there's a lot of unforeseen issues you're creating by your basic open borders policy. Please consider, adjusting what you're doing. We can't just absorb all these people. We have pressure on the local hospitals because they come across the border needing health care, pressure on local communities, pressure in the housing to provide for these people. You might want to think about, kind of tamp down a bit on your open borders thing. That came from Republicans. However, it turns out that two Democrats in Congress have also waved the flag to President Biden and said, you know what, this is looking kind of dangerous here, President Biden. These are members of Congress who are Democrats from border communities who are already thinking about elections of 2022 and thinking, I don't want to be the one standing by President Biden as our community is overwhelmed with illegal immigrants. No apparent policy in terms of taking care of them. No apparent policy in terms, of course, of dealing with them if they happen to be testing positive coronavirus. So, I'll close the first five by saying I think that all of these, as many liberal political ideas do, they sound great in theory. They sound so kind and so generous. And I think if you're you're floating around the Ivy Leagues in the East Coast, and you're a Yale guy and a Harvard guy, and you can pontificate away about the beauty of open borders and not being so harsh on people who just want to come to America for a better life, and don't be so harsh on immigration. And we really don't need to have, such strict border policy. We ought to be welcoming. Sounds great when you live thousands of miles away in a cozy little community that looks a lot like you, and you're not living on the border in Texas and other border states in America. You're not the one whose hospitals are overrun, schools are overrun, health facilities are overrun, and you're not the one taking responsibility for the health and safety and protection of the communities facing the people who've crossed the borders. Not all of them, despite what the left tells you, not all these border crossers are just kind of really sweet little families of mom, dad, and the kids just coming to America for better life. Sadly, when we have had open borders in the past, we have learned the lesson that often with open borders, we find sex traffickers, drug traffickers, human traffickers, dangerous people finding out that America has an open border and thinking, gee, this might be a good time to get in. So President Biden is getting a little bit of a reality check early in his administration, or to be more precise, he's holding that slot called president. Kamala Harris, if anyone's actually reviewing policy, is Kamala Harris, receiving notice from people in Congress on their own side saying this is not going to play well with the voters, not a good idea, maybe you ought to rethink this open borders baloney. And that, my very fine friends, is today's First Five. I mentioned at the start of the show, we have a guest in studio, and I actually had not met this gentleman until 10 minutes ago, but I'm glad he's here. And we're going to talk about a topic which we've had other guests on talking about child sex trafficking and what exactly you do about it. How do you, America has, at least the good news, become more aware of it in recent years, and especially, sadly, Texas, where we always think we're kind of the bastion of law and order and, great safe place, a state, oriented on families and safety and law and order. But Texas has a huge problem with respect to child sex trafficking. So this individual we're going to talk to, who's in studio, his name is Craig Sawyer, and we'll be talking to him in 1 minute, but I want to introduce you to him, a little bit about him. He's a former Navy SEAL, which, you gotta love that. Just a former Navy SEAL, guy who's actually put himself out there in harm's way for America. Former Navy SEAL Team, now SEAL Team 6, the famous. He counterterrorist operator and sniper. So you always want to be friends with him. Decorated for heroic service in combat. He was in charge of the high threat mobile security agent in charge for the U.S. Department of State and intelligence agencies in war zones. This is a serious patriot, a serious servant of America. Team leader for counter-poaching operations in Africa for Animal Planet's Battlegrounds Rhino Wars. That's very interesting. But the reason he's here is because after all this wonderful service for America, he formed an organization that we're going to talk about today, and it is Veterans for Child Rescue. Veterans for Child Rescue, helping to rescue children caught up in sex trafficking, one of the most hideous crimes imaginable. But he's formed this organization, and they have a film out, a documentary film, talking about what their work is doing. And actually, the film is credited with helping with the rescue of several children, or 22 people were arrested because of this film, people becoming aware of the prevalence and ugliness and the reality of sex trafficking. So, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Craig Sawyer. Hello, sir.
Thank you, Debbie. I appreciate you having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
Glad you're here. And I want to, I do want to talk about Veterans for Child Rescue, which is a very cool thing. But I want to hear about being a Navy SEAL. This is like every little boy's dream. I'm going to be a Navy SEAL guy. So what did you do as part of Navy SEALs that you can talk about?
It's really, being a Navy SEAL is really being a problem solver under the worst adverse conditions, the most unthinkable conditions. You have to bring about a positive outcome for the people of the United States. So those were the missions that we were sent on. You need to destroy something that the enemy has, or you need to recover somebody that the enemy has, or you need to destroy the enemy. So they're tough missions, and they're usually in bad places, hostile locations. And our method of transit to work is not just drinking a Starbucks and cruising on the highway and fighting traffic. We're jumping out of helicopters or aircraft at altitude, or coming up from submarines and coming through rough surf and those types of things. So it takes its toll on your physical body, but it's a huge adventure. And during times when you're at war, of course, you do bury a lot of your teammates, and that's painful and it stings, but knowing that you made a contribution and served your country, it feels good. So when you get to serve with fantastic overachievers to your left and right.
I'm sure. Fantastic overachievers, that's a good term. So just roughly, where are all the places you've been? Like, where did you do most of your operations?
I've been to 60 countries around the world, so we could spend the rest of the talk just speaking about that. But mostly Middle East countries for me. I've been a lot of Eastern nations as well, but mostly around in the Middle East.
In the Middle East. How about in Africa? I saw something in your resume mention Africa.
I did some counter-poacher operations in Africa, yeah, and that was fantastic. That was after my military time,
okay,
and that was for an Animal Planet series. And so we did a 3-part special called Battleground Rhino Wars, and it was all about running counter-poacher operations and trying to save the last of the endangered rhinos over there.
In what countries?
South Africa.
South Africa.
That was in South Africa.
Okay. You had an adventurous life. I love this.
I did. I've got the medical record to prove it. The bad knees and the bad elbows and everything. Nothing works right, but I've got great memories and a life that I can look back on and be proud of.
Yeah. Another thing you did before, we are going to get to your Veterans for Child Rescue, but you also, I thought this was the coolest idea when I was reading about you. You formed a consulting firm, I guess you call it,
yeah,
that helps advise filmmakers and Hollywood type people how to make realistic presentations about military language, adventures. Is that right? Can you describe that?
Yeah. Well, Tactical Insider is my consulting company, and I trained actors for their tactical roles in big films. And so they would hire me out, and I would teach them to shoot, move, and fight, and communicate the way that we do. If they were going to play the part of an assassin or a special operations member or veteran, I could depict and show them how to pull it off and portray that role so that people weren't distracted by the inaccuracy. They could stay lost in the fantasy of the film, and they could really shine in that role. So I did quite a bit of that, and it was fun. Did
you think of that idea yourself?
Well, there's the idea of consulting, technical advising is nothing new, but I just had a particular pedigree and experience that I could share with it. So I
think it's so cool.
Yeah, I did it for a little while. It was about 10 years. It was fun. I still do it occasionally, but only on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, I read endlessly. I read spy novels and mystery novels, and I love at the end the authors will often recount, say, in this aspect of story, I consulted so-and-so, thank you for so-and-so, because they're talking about the difference between writing a book where the police work or the investigation or something just sounds hokey versus realistic. It's the same. I love that. I think it's really cool. Okay, so now we can talk about the real reason you're here, but you founded this group, Vets for Child Rescue.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, can you just describe overall, before we dive in, like what do you guys do? How do you get involved in the whole child trafficking problem?
Yeah, well, what we do is we run joint operations with federal and local law enforcement, arresting the predators. And we have got 23 arrests and warrants so far with a 100% conviction rate. So our template of operations is very strong. And we alert the populace. And we spent 3 years filming a documentary, Contraland, and you can watch that at contralandmovie.com for free. It's a high quality 90-minute documentary, and it is an empowering expose of the threat against all of our children here in the United States, which has become a $38 to $50 billion a year criminal enterprise and the fastest growing crime spree on earth, right here in the United States. So, Debbie, I got tired of traveling around the world to stop a threat that may one day come here, after I learned from a friend of mine in the CIA that said, hey, Craig, the area that we grew up just north of Houston is the epicenter for child sex trafficking in the United States. And I thought, my God, that is so counter to our culture and anything that we're okay with. I'm insulted, I feel assaulted, and I feel heartbroken. And when I found out that at the core of it, it really is a spiritual thing. There is such a force as good and evil.
Oh, amen.
And this is, that the children are at the center of it. Yeah, there's political extortion and blackmail, like with Epstein, Weinstein, and Hollywood, and Maxwell, and all these kind of things. So they film each other doing God knows what with children. Yeah. And there's $38 to $50 billion a year. And there's the sexual perversion. But once you get under all that, the most ugly, rancid core is a spiritual thing where they believe that defiling God's most precious and innocent is the religious thing that they think they're supposed to do to get some kind of special benefit from their dark side. These are very sick and twisted people.
Okay, I didn't even know this aspect of it. You're saying that some of the people you've been involved, you tracked down and caught and had arrested, actually think that the act of committing some kind of horrible sexual assault on a child is a fulfillment of a religious duty.
Yes, ma'am. It's an entire subculture, and they believe that defiling God's most precious and innocent, which is the children, is somehow benefits them. And I just can't comprehend why someone would get off on that goat trail and go down into that kind of pit of darkness. But there's a lot of it, and it's the biggest kept secret, I think, right now in the United States. We're not being empowered with that information by the mainstream news media. They're covering it. So coming from a covert background, counterterrorism, intelligence community, I realized child trafficking is a domestic covert operation, and it's huge. And you and I haven't been adequately informed on it, so we can't defend our kids from it or empower those that we know. So I realized that exposing it, tearing the lid off of this, shining the light on it, and empowering the people with that, the fact that it's going on, how pervasive it is, and that it's in all of our neighborhoods by now, then we can stand up against it. 320 million Americans can rise up, hound our elected officials for stronger enforcement, stronger protections for the children, stronger hammer down policies against the predators, and change our culture back to one that's simply defensive of our offspring rather than destructive of them, as has grown to become the case.
Wow, I love that you do that. I'm very grateful you do that. Anyone who's attracted to that, you have to be in some way mentally ill. Not excusing them and saying they shouldn't be prosecuted, but you have to be crazy. But,
look at it. Look at who Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were catering to, some of the world's elite. And why are so many of them wanting children that don't have any of the sexual attraction bells and whistles that a fully grown female would have? A child doesn't have any of those features. There should be no one attracted to a child sexually. So look at all the elite that they're catering to. So there's a big subculture that's into this, and it's horrible, and it's not okay. And I mean to do something about it, and so I've begun taking action.
So you work, are there other veterans who work with you in this? Veterans?
Yes, ma'am. I've got a team of Delta Force and SEAL Team 6 brothers that I've operated with all over the world, that I've known for decades, that are my Viper team, veterans interdicting pedophile rings. And we've got 23 federal criminal investigators that have retired from different agencies that we've run further vetting on and brought them in, and 30 analysts from intelligence agencies all over the country. And we've done the vetting and brought them in as well. So all of this manpower and capability, and then new technology from the American Industrial Compact that brought in this technological capability that they don't want to submit to the federal government right now because it keeps getting shared straight to China. And they're like, Craig, we're going to hold on to our intellectual property for now so that we don't empower our enemies.
What is the group holding on their own intellectual property? The name of the
American Industrial Compact. And they are geniuses that invent a lot of the intellectual property, the programming and software that run our intelligence community, our aerospace industry, and our Department of Defense. And they're tired of their inventions being used against our nation rather than for it. And so they've brought that intellectual property, that technological development, and offered these programs to us. So we can investigate child predators and child trafficking rings to a degree, as of right now, that's greater than what the NSA, FBI, and CIA have on a technical basis. We've got newer, more powerful software than they do due to this dynamic with China and our national security leaks.
And you guys don't need a search warrant.
Well, we still need search warrants, but we can
to get to data
learn.
You do?
Yeah, we develop, and that's why I'm on this tour of Texas right now. I'm meeting with anyone who's everyone in law enforcement in Texas on the federal and local level to let them know the manpower and the horsepower and the technological capability that we have to coordinate future joint operations. And so I just came from a meeting right now, and we've got another one after this. So
how many people are total in your group? Like 60? Is that?
Well, I can reach to hundreds if we need. So we've got vetted on our investigations program 54 people.
Okay, and so you people are all trained with all your fabulous knowledge and training. How do you end up identifying, who might be a predator? I mean, how do you figure that out?
Well, we run sting operations, and you can see it in our documentary Contraland.
Okay.
We'll develop a relationship with the district attorney. We first find a DA that wants to prosecute, because sadly not all of them do. And George Soros funds the campaigns of some who will not. And so we realize that. So we identify the heroes that will protect and defend their community. And we develop relationships with them. We let them know what we bring. We coordinate to their satisfaction. And then we start running joint sting operations. And the predators, when they see that a child is offered up, it'll turn your stomach, Debbie, but they run. We put one ad out in Connecticut, a local ad on an application, and in 30 days, 5,000 predator responses.
You were offering
responded to that. A 12-year-old child, there were 5,000 predators that responded to that ad. And we arrested 5, including an active federal agent and an illegal alien and a list of other people during that first operation. So,
wow.
We get all kinds.
Yeah. I remember reading this, it was several years ago now, but in Texas there was some sex trafficking ring that was uncovered, and the child victims were in this trailer. Like they were being held in this trailer, and there's a lineup of people going to get inside the trailer. And so the police had come. It was great. They happened to catch a bunch of people in line. One of them was an emergency room doctor. One of them was an assistant pastor. I mean, to me, this whole thing is so grotesque and corrupt. I assume these people are just, lunatic dropouts of society. But
it could be your next door neighbor. It could be elected officials. It's very disappointing to see. But if we mean to protect our children and put a stop to this runaway rampage of harm and abuse, we've got to face it and learn the nature of it so that we can put a stop to it collectively as a society.
How do you get funded?
Nonprofit organization, so it's all private donations. People see what we do and they like it and they support us.
It's a C3? Is it?
Yes, ma'am. 501c3.
501c3, and it's called Veterans for Child Rescue.
Veterans for Child Rescue, and our website is vetsforchildrescue.org.
And the 4, you use the digit 4.
The number 4, yes, ma'am.
Yeah. vetsforchildrescue.org. .org. Okay. I love this, and I love that you're doing it. And honestly, these kind of things where, every time you run across a story like this, you just think, well, before I became more familiar with it, because I've now had several different groups have come through and talked about this in the show, you just assume that this is happening in some, horrible country where there's no rooted culture and people.
Yes,
but here in here in Texas, but here in America, it's mind blowing. So I love that you're doing that. So once you catch these people, if you catch them, you can turn them over to the police, and they.
Yeah, we run the operation, but we've got police right there with us. We'll have up to 9 agencies represented in the location that we're running the operation in real time. So once we are done with our portion of the operation and they're ready to be handcuffed, I'll give a brevity code and step aside, and the takedown team, sheriff's department or whichever agency is going to handle the actual physical arrest, will run into the room and make the takedown.
I want to talk about your film, but one more thing. So all these people you've managed to get arrested as a result of your work, do you have any sense of how long they're sentenced for?
Well, a lot of them 30 years to life. I mean, some pretty egregious stuff. We had one active federal agent show up with a birthday cake for a 12-year-old girl that he thought was turning 13, and he brought a tiny little mini skirt and stockings for her and who he thought was her mother to have whatever sexcapade he imagined. So,
okay.
And it's important and we learned something, Debbie, in this process, that the average number of children that these predators harm throughout their lifetime is 70.
77.
They don't tend to stop. Like some predators tend to be able to be rehabilitated and stop, but a child sex predator does not seem to be rehabilitatable and salvageable. They like to be scout leaders, Sunday school teachers, and things like that with access to children, especially unsupervised access. And some of them rape hundreds of children before they die, and some of them get caught immediately. So the average is 70 children each. And so it's a serial type of predation, and we just can't expect to let someone right back out and they won't do it again. We know that they go right back to it.
I was going to say, I'm fine with life. I think that if you're that twisted, I think they probably have some twisted thing in their family background or their life's background. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Once you get the point, you'll do that. You'll do it again. You can't be part of society. Okay, tell us about your movie is Contraland. I'm going to spell that Contraland. Contraland. Tell us about that movie.
Yeah, well, the name Contraland came from children becoming the new type of contraband. And sadly, our beloved United States has become the new Contraland. So that's the genesis of the verbiage. And I filmed it out of a broken heart and tired of just being sad about it. I sat down and cried, I knelt down and prayed, and then I stood up and I acted. And what I decided to do was expose this whole thing, rip the lid off of it, shine the light on this horrible
crime spree. It's a documentary describing what you do.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily describe what we do as it does explain the problem. It shows the American populace or anyone else that watches it, it's available globally. It shows them the nature of child sex trafficking and what it's like. We go to Southeast Asia in 3 different countries. We run undercover operations in bars and brothels there and show that kind of aspect. And we cover Maxwell and Epstein and this kind of thing, and Harvey Weinstein out of Hollywood, and the different aspects of it. We bring in experts like Dr. Judith Reisman and Bob Hamer from inside the FBI, and these people are all on our board of directors, by the way, our board of advisors.
Yeah.
And Jack Farmer, who's the real Jack Ryan from the Tom Clancy series, his book series. He wrote the Jack Ryan figure, that character, most closely after Jack Farmer's real life. And Jack's grown to be a friend of mine. He's on our board, and he's just a wealth of information and contacts. And so we've stacked our board with people that are well connected and well-meaning and just helpful. So we're just fighting together, and it's inspiring to be able to rally good people with you and not just feel like you're having to go it entirely alone.
I'm never speechless. However, this is an amazing, first of all, an amazing phenomenon that we have that's going on in America and around the world. And then secondly, I love your spirit of deciding to do something about it, because a lot of people, they read about it, this is horrible, how could this be? And they either can't think of something to do or they don't know what. They write a check, which is a great thing to do, write a check and support somebody else. Yeah. But to step up after the life you've led, being a Navy SEAL and being all around the world and having this really I know it's glamorous isn't the right word, but at least exciting life.
Yeah.
And to come back and settle and just decide what I'm going to focus on now is rescuing children from child sex trafficking. It's just a very, very noble cause.
Thank you. Well, I'm just not wired to turn away from harm that I may be able to do something about. So, I kind of prayed, God, be with me, help me. And I took action, and it feels like the right thing. So it's an ugly fight. I mean, the other side wants to discredit me and smear my name to try to silence me, but it's not working. We're just growing faster and faster and faster. So it does feel good. As a civilian, a busted up veteran and father, just to go, what can I do now against this horrific global crime spree, and have this machine building around me, and have people going, I'm with you, Craig. And have aircraft assets and drones and technology and intelligence assets offered to us. It's humbling. It feels good.
Well, it's rightly motivated. I mean, that's the whole thing. It is not personal glory, personal fame. It is to address a truly horrific problem. So if people want to donate, because you said it's a 501c3 and you function off of donations, the website to go to is?
vetsforchildrescue.org, and we've got a secure donor box function right there on the site.
Vets for, the digit 4, vetsforchildrescue.org.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm so glad that someone reached out to me and let me know about you, that you're in town, and so glad you could join me today. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on. It was a pleasure.
It was a great interview. Wow. I mean, great interview. Thank you so much. Okay, folks, I have one other quick story today. I actually, the last few days, it seems like I don't quite get to my third story, and I'm going to get back to the Dr. Seuss story that I mentioned yesterday, but I can't do it today, so I'll have to get to it on Monday. I will say, before I get to my last story, which is about BLM, Black Lives Matter, and Antifa still ranting and roaring and rioting, I do want to mention that 1 month from today, on Thursday, April 1st, is the first day that our show turns to the membership plan, so that we have Monday through Wednesday, same as always, 3 p.m. Central Time, available to anybody and all over all the social media places that you listen to the show. I urge you to always try to listen on our website, americacanwetalk.org. We have the show go out on YouTube and Twitter and Facebook. It's up on Rumble later. But the safe way to see it is on our website, americacanwetalk.org. If you go to that website at 3 p.m. Central Time, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and just put in americacanwetalk.org/live/, you can watch it live on my website. And the reason I encourage that is because we have been, if you're a regular listener, you know we've been the subject of more than a little censoring. And so I'm trying to protect the show and protect my ability to talk with you about preserving this precious, extraordinary country, America. What changes in April is, beginning in April, on every Thursday, so just one show a week on Thursdays, is for members only. And that means that it will not be in any other social media, be just at my website, americacanwetalk.org. And membership is a really good deal. It is either $5 a month or $50 a year. And when you go to our website, that we'll have it set up, I believe, by the end of next week to accommodate this the membership thing. You click on the membership thing, you make your payment, you can do $5 a month, or you can do $50 a year, and you will be able to, on the membership page, watch a show that day. It's actually, we're doing that show, the Thursday show, in a different studio. Same building here, but a studio next door to this one, so it'll look different. The differences are, it is a different studio. It is, we're probably going to have really high quality guests, but sometimes it'll be just me. I get a lot of emails from people saying, I like it better when you just talk. But anyway, some of the both. You'll meet Matt the Wonderful, the producer I've mentioned for years, he is truly wonderful. He'll be there. And the whole thing that's going to be different is it's entirely a Q&A. I've never had, and all the time the show is on Salem Radio, or when the show is here, I don't have call-in capacity, or I don't use the call-in capacity. So, but it's going to be entirely Q&A, and you can sit down and type a question out ahead of time. You can email me at americacanwetalk@gmail.com and say, I want to know what you think about X. I have literally hundreds of emails now of people saying, I wish you had talked about this or that. So it's going to be answering questions, but also live questions during the show. we have a great feature on raindrop technology. So if you are watching this show and you want to become part of the America Can We Talk family, you can join our texting setup. And all you do is go, maybe Matt the Wonderful can find this slide while I'm filling time here, but you text 53445. That's instead of the 2 line, like you'd say, to your friend Sally, you put 53445, and in the topic line, there it is. Put as your message, America. That comes right to my account, and you'll be able to use this, and we'll have a separate and similar, same 53445, and the word talk for members only. So during the show, we'll start the show, and you can put in a text using the talk thing, say, talk, I want you to explain X, Y, Z. I do have many questions, people asking about Maria Zack, who's been on the show a couple of times. She founded Nations in Action. She brought forth evidence of the Italian involvement in the stealing of America's election. I will give you updates on those kinds of stories. So, love to have you join. You can still watch the show for free Monday through Wednesday, but starting in April, literally 4 weeks from today, we'll start our first membership time. We're going to have Dr. Bartlett join us, Dr. Richard Bartlett of Midland, Texas. And the following Thursday, I know we'll have Lieutenant Colonel Alan West. After that, we'll have guests, sometimes not guests, but I urge you to become a member. Okay, now the last topic for today, very quickly. I want to talk about BLM and Antifa rioting. We talked last year when the rioting began. You may have remembered when we had the first big riots in Dallas, where I live. Star Parker, who's based in Washington, who's been a longtime friend, texted 6 in the morning, I got to come on. I want to talk about what's happening. And she was really, really good that day. We've been talking a lot about the fact of the rioting by Black Lives Matter, which the main component and power of Black Lives Matter is a Marxist organization orchestrated and funded and controlled by communist elements in this country. That's who is behind the rioting of Black Lives Matter throughout the year, as well as Antifa. Similarly, also paid for and funded by the communist element in America, very particularly with respect to the Antifa. There is a direct connection with this organization, which I'm going to tell you the name of. It is Youth Liberation Front. 2 different absolutely anti-American communist organizations, Youth Liberation Front, Green Anti-Capitalist Front, and there are others too, funded by the Chinese Communist Party on the ground in America, and they're the ones inspiring, fomenting, funding, and encouraging much of the radical violence you see in the streets of America, including the violence related to Black Lives Matter and the violence by Antifa. Much of the discussion last year was, they're upset about race relations. They're upset because, they hate President Trump. It'll all go away. Don't worry. It'll all go away once Trump is out. That was the argument, that they're just so upset because Trump's a racist, whatever dumb argument they want to make. And so they said, all of this is, obviously it tied to the George Floyd incident in Minnesota, which we're not going to talk about again today. But that was the premise, the alleged premise for this rioting, was all of the George Floyd and other incidents involving interaction between police and Black American citizens. And as I told you all year long, and I will tell you again, the police aren't perfect. We always try to improve. We have things that happen that aren't right. Sometimes we do investigate. But the fact is, the radical organizations that burned down our cities last year, almost all of 2020, burned down buildings, destroyed property, burned cars, murdered police officers, murdered civilians. This was not an organic uprising of honest-to-goodness people upset in America about Donald Trump. This was fomented, organized, and funded by the communist element in this country, also greatly funded by the Chinese Communist Party. We've had many, many experts on this show explaining this and drawing the connections and drawing diagrams. But I want to lay that background to make the point right now. If all of that rioting last year was really just due to the fact that Donald Trump is a bad guy and they didn't like him, then you would think, well, then there wouldn't be rioting anymore because we're all done. Finally got rid of that guy, bad guy. Well, I want to just tell you a few things that are happening right now here in America. And the media doesn't tell you these stories because you're supposed to be thinking everything's okay now because Trump's out of office. In Portland, the wonderful videographer, reporter guy, Andy, and his last name is NGO. I think you just say no, but whatever it is, he is a on-the-ground journalist, video journalist, is continuing to report Portland, over the weekend, using rocks, batons, and weapons, Antifa smashed up businesses and cars in the Pearl District overnight, shut down the roads, same area that they severely vandalized, Antifa did back when Trump won the election in 2016. Antifa still attacking America because the goal of Antifa was not just to get rid of Trump. The goal of Antifa is eventually the communist destruction of America. That's the goal of Antifa. They're not going to stop just because Trump is out. They might like Biden a little bit better because he pretty much humors them and won't go after them, but they're still on the ground, still attacking America. Same with Black Lives Matter. If you didn't know about it, in Louisville, Kentucky, over the weekend, Black Lives Matter thugs were out in the streets, breaking down, shutting down streets, shutting down traffic, yelling. I have videos in both these, but I ran out of time gathering them. But yelling, "F the police," obviously extremely alarming and scary to people trying to drive on the streets in Louisville, Kentucky. And this is Biden's America. And somehow you don't see the media. Another point I want to make: you don't see the media saying, "Well, look, look at this horrible violence. Must be Biden's fault." You don't hear him say that because you don't ever blame the Democrats or the left. You blame the Trump and the right. And so the entire, what I always call them, the Democrat media mob in this country will pillory President Trump and any conservative with any responsibility if there's rioting at all, it's all Trump's fault. Now here we're in Biden's America, and I'd like you to point one serious media outlet on the left who will hold Biden accountable for these people doing exactly what they did during the Trump years. And you can't, because they aren't. And so great journalists like this guy, Andy Ngo, and others filming what the Black Lives Matter folks are doing, filming in Louisville, Kentucky, Washington, D.C., Portland. It's ongoing. And last point I'll make before I wrap up the show today, you hear so much conversation in America about the attack on the Capitol January 6th. We've been over this many times. I repeat, President Trump spoke to the audience, spoke to his followers and supporters that day, clearly hoping that in Congress that day, there might be enough Republicans to stand up and say, you know what, we're going to send back the Electoral College votes to some of these states that are now saying we might have gotten our count wrong. That's what he was hoping. President Trump told them, his listeners, his followers, supporters, they should peacefully and patriotically protest. The attack of the Capitol happened. We've been over 1,000 times. Yes, there were Trump supporters who committed crimes, got inside the building, committed crimes. Yes, they're being prosecuted. Yes, they should be. There were other elements of America, Antifa and Black Lives Matter, also on the ground in Washington that day at the Capitol on January 6th. It was a bad day. I'm in favor of prosecuting everybody who committed violence. You can't smash windows. You can't destroy property, because this is America. We don't do that. But we don't equally blame the various parties involved. But what I wanted to close out today's show by pointing out, if you didn't know it, so you keep hearing about the Capitol and the study to find out how much damage was done, how much it's going to cost to fix, and they're just determined, the left is determined to make sure every single person with any liability, any culpability for what occurred in Washington on January 6th be hunted down and prosecuted. I mean, I'm not saying it shouldn't happen, because you do have to protect the Capitol. You shouldn't have a barbed wire fence around it. And you shouldn't have armed with machine gun guards around it, because that's what they do in third world countries. But here we are. Yes, you have to go after the criminals, but there is such a profound disinterest on the part of the Democrat media mob in this country on going after or laying blame at the feet of the people who committed the violence in this country in the streets of America throughout 2020. Just no interest. No culpability, no tying of that conduct to particular individuals in the government. It is like the Capitol thing was one thing. Everybody who even, spoke a bad word about the election results was a suspect. Everybody, and people should be. I'm with the idea you have to prosecute the people, whatever their political persuasion, who engage in violence at the Capitol. No interest at all in people who engage in violence around this country all of 2020. My follow-up and final point is, somebody ran a few numbers. Just if you didn't know this. So there was big damage at the Capitol. It's going to take a lot of money to fix the mess at the Capitol, when the windows and statues, whatever else was damaged. And they need to fix it. And that's what we do. We're supposed to have a lovely U.S. Capitol building. I love the U.S. Capitol. But anyway, the damage caused by the George Floyd riots, the damage in dollars in this country by the riots, the destruction of police cars, police buildings, public buildings, private people's, individual Americans who had spent their life putting together a business. That was how they put food on the table. Those kind of businesses destroyed. All of that, the damage at the Capitol is one set that they're going to go after and fix. The damage, the cost to America of the riots that followed the George Floyd incident in Minneapolis, 66 times the amount of money was the cost of the damage of George Floyd riots as compared with what happened at the Capitol. And you can hardly hear a Democrat media mob member in this country even interested in talking about how are we going to make this whole. And the riots around this country, clearly, beyond the fact that they were agitated and fomented by communist forces, were at the very least ignored by leftist politicians. Far more than being ignored, in many cases, you can point to language the left used in continuing to foment outrage, to continuing to tell people that, yes, you're right, America is a terrible country filled with bad things and filled with racism, and you're right, and you should fight, and you should stand up. Many, many things of actual consequence likely to have persuaded those kind of rioters, said by politicians on the left, no culpability, no responsibility. But somehow Donald Trump is supposed to have been responsible for January 6th. And this is going to be a sticking point, I'm sorry to say, in America for a long time, because there are conservatives who are going to say, you know what, yes, we fixed the Capitol. Yes, we have to have an orderly transition of power. But the whole concept of somehow trying to tag not just Donald Trump, but every single one of his followers with responsibility, and his supporters, his voters, his 74 million plus voters, with the culpability of what happened on the Capitol on January 6th. And last point that I'm really going to wrap up because I'm out of time, but is this. The reason the powers that be in Washington leave that fencing up around the Capitol, again, looks like a third world country, looks like a crazy place without a stable civilization. The reason they leave that up is to continue to send the message that Donald Trump and all of his supporters are scary, are likely to engage in violence, must be held back by guards with machine guns and barbed wire around the Capitol. It is not there because the people in the Capitol actually feel endangered. It's not because they are trying to make sure they're safe. It is a political tactic to send the message to America, you better really, really hate and fear and despise not just Donald Trump, but the entire American right, the conservatives who supported, or even there were many people who aren't conservative who supported Donald Trump. They're scary, they're evil, we're barely hanging on. It is a political tactic to leave that fencing up, and it is a disgrace in this country, in America, that continues to stand there and keep the American people from the people's house. I could do a lot more about this, but I'm way past out of time. So, as I do at the close of every show, I try to tell you why the stories we talked about today matter to you. So we started today talking about the border abandonment backfire, radical left immigration agenda driven by ideologues who don't live on the border. Stop the wall, open the borders, reinstate catch and release, give them a pathway to citizenship. All of that thinking is out of touch. The GOP warning of national security implications of surge of illegal immigrants, border crossings up to 3,500 a day. Did you know that number, by the way? 3,500 a day, border crossings. Alien children crossings, averaging 300 a day. 108 illegal immigrants picked up in Texas, tested positive for COVID, and then just released into Texas. New overflow facilities, 10 cities, building all over the Texas southern border. Even Texas Democrat Representative Henry Cuellar warns of the loss of control. Was a vote for Biden in November 2020 evidence that Americans wanted these border immigration policies? And the answer is no. Nobody wants what Biden is doing, not what they wanted. And on BLM and Antifa still rioting, BLM and Antifa seek a Marxist revolution, overthrow the USA. Mainstream media sold the narrative that BLM and Antifa unrest was all about getting rid of Trump. The election of Biden did not change their objective, it only accelerated efforts. BLM is now blocking traffic in Louisville, Kentucky, and yelling very crass language over police brutality charges. Antifa is still rioting in Portland Another Antifa rally is expected in Washington, D.C. Oh, that was a big thing I didn't even tell you. I know it's not on the slide, but all of the monitoring of these left-wing sources in this country, anti-American sources, there is a planned March 6th, everybody riot, an urging on March 6th, right around the corner, to have the streets of America filled with all these anti-American Marxists. And they're fully aware of this. It's being reported that all of these Antifa, BLM, America-hating, radical leftist organizations are planning a huge day in America on March 6th. Damages and losses from BLM Antifa rioting in the summer of 2020 estimated at 66 times the damage or losses from the January 6th attack at the Capitol. Yet Christopher Wray, I didn't get to read about him today, but I will, Nancy Pelosi say white supremacy is America's #1 threat. Americans are witnessing an ongoing Marxist revolution. The mainstream media, Democrats, deep state are denying it and thereby enabling it. And that, my very fine friends, is America Can We Talk for today. One more point about the new plan on membership. We're putting a blog post up at americacanwetalk.org explaining the membership plan, explaining the newsletter. If you don't get a once weekly newsletter, you can go to americacanwetalk.org and on the homepage, hit the subscribe button. I'll get your email onto the list. You get a once a week email from me. I never share or sell the list. I just send an email linking to the stories and interviews in the previous week. There's also a donate button on our homepage. This show is entirely listener supported. If you'd like to donate to support this show, I would so appreciate that. You hit the donate button. You can do a one-time donation. You can do a recurring donation. I'd love it. And very soon we'll have our membership page all set up on the website, and you can join as a member. I do this show every day to speak up for the extraordinary experiment in human liberty that is America. I do it to preserve America. I appreciate so much your listening every day, Monday through Thursday at 3 p.m. Central Time to America Can We Talk, where I always talk truth about America because America matters. And I'll talk to you next time.
America Can We Talk? Truth about America.
Can you